We're delighted to have you all here at the MIT Media Lab, which is the epicenter of technology innovation, even here on the MIT campus, which itself is a place of extreme innovation, to have a conversation around the power and role of technology as a force for positive disruption on the continent. This, of course, embraces many emerging themes. The world of telecoms is the most obvious. Wireless enabled a leapfrog over the technology of a century ago, the copper line. This meant that a technology for communication could be deployed far faster and at far lower cost than in a previous generation. Now, telecoms, in the beginning feature phones and ultimately smartphones, and increasingly smartphones, in turn enable and are a platform for a new generation of higher-level value-added services, especially consumer-facing things. But it's not just consumer. The world of healthcare, the world of agri-innovation, the world of all things natural resource extraction, these are all domains of tremendous economic import where technology can have a game-changing consequence. We've assembled on stage for you a panel of four who come from different domains and territories and roles in this technology disruption arena. And we won't go over their biographies in detail. What I encourage you to do is grab your guide to see their backgrounds in detail. But instead, we'll ask each of our panelists to say a few words of self-introduction and also to spotlight what they're most interested in, a few words about their particular interest in our theme. Adeji, why don't you take us off and get started?
Okay. Thank you very much. My name is Ayodeji Adeomi. I'm the president and CEO of Jobberman. Jobberman.com is currently the largest employment website in sub-Saharan Africa, outside of South Africa. It was started in 2009 with two other co-founders. So in the space of disruption with respect to technology, in a matter of 4 years, we've been able to significantly played a key part in the structural migration of people who typically will look for employment in the newspapers and, of course, in other traditional media. We have moved them online. And one of the key driving forces behind that is when you look at Africa, you discover that the cost of broadband penetration has significantly been dropping over the last 10 years. And of course, when you also look at Africa itself, like Ian mentioned in his vision talk, you discover that Africa has one of the largest amount of people in the labor force. Nigeria, for example, is the 9th most important labor force market with about 50 million people within the working population. That's a huge market size. And increasingly, when you look at rural-urban migration, you discover that increasingly people are looking for jobs. And of course, one thing that makes jobs very important is jobs is integral to socio-economic progression. It's pretty much like a lifestyle engineering tool. So I think one of the key things that we'll see over the next 5 to 10 years is we're going to see some of these changes happening in other key sectors as well. Retail is one other example that is extremely changing. It's changing in a very interesting way. Look at Nigeria, for example. Some of the biggest internet news happening on the continent is happening in the retail space. Retail alone, e-commerce alone has been able to attract about 100 to 150 million dollars in the last 12 months in Nigeria alone. And of course, when you look at other key sectors, look at the financial service sector. The financial service sector is one of the biggest sectors anywhere you are in the world, whether you're in Nigeria, Mozambique, Angola, Kenya, or even Nigeria. You discover that the market opportunity is huge. For example, look at Nigeria. Nigeria has a consumer spend of over $150 billion annually. And on the back of that, when you look at the consumer credit market, the consumer credit market alone has, in terms of size, is about a $50 billion annual market. So when you're talking about a $50 billion annual market opportunity, and your ability to execute on the $50 billion opportunity is just 1%, then, of course, you've been able to create a $500 million business in, say, 3 years. So clearly, I think there are opportunities everywhere, all the key major sectors. And when you look at financial services is clearly one of the key driver of any economy. It's same thing for Nigeria. And when you look at Nigeria structurally, you find out that the ability of people to be able to attract credit is extremely low. Why is it low? Of course, when you talk to the traditional banks or the commercial banks, they find it extremely unattractive to give unsecured loans, for example, to people that really don't have a credit history. And why don't people have a credit history? Because the data points are not out there. So the opportunity is out there for someone to build out the data points, for someone to build out a solution in that space. So clearly, whether you're talking of retail with e-commerce or you're talking financial services with unsecured credit loan solution, or when you're talking about employment, which is a huge opportunity as well, a lot of disruption is currently being done and can be done on the continent. And my chat to you guys this morning is, if you're thinking of Africa and you're serious about Africa, I think the time is now. All the other speakers have spoken about that, but I think the best way to do that is you just need to start now. And the best way to address any opportunity is look for a big enough market opportunity to go after. And of course, the biggest risk you stand with any project is your execution risk. Of course, there are political risk, there are business climate risk, there is currency risk. But the biggest risk you stand really at the end of the day is execution risk. And why is it execution risk? You'll discover that the most successful businesses in the world are built on people. And your ability to be able to execute very well on any idea would determine how successful the idea will be. So at the end of the day, for you to be able to expand the scope of your success, or to be able to increase your chances or your chance of being successful, is you look for a big enough opportunity that even if you execute at 1% of the market opportunity, then you still have a fantastic opportunity in terms of ability to create wealth and, of course, ability to create value out of the opportunity. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sangu Delhi, and I am the CEO and founder of Golden Palm Investments, GPI. GPI is an early-stage investment company. We look for incredible opportunities across the continent, and especially we look for disruptive technologies. When I think of Africa 10, 15, 20 years out, and I think about Africa in the context today, 1 billion consumers today, 15% internet users, yet 650 million mobile subscribers. And when you look at the growth rate of smartphone penetration in the continent, McKinsey just did a study that said if the internet penetration grows at the same rate as we saw mobile subscription, we could basically add as much as $300 billion in GDP to the continent. So as I think in that context, I think about an Africa where the 650 million people will, could reach 1 billion people, and all these people could have internet access. What could we do with that, right? This mobile revolution, what could it be a platform for? Beyond just everyone having a phone, it could now be used to do things like in Nigeria, you have a novel way of combating corruption with getting subsidies to farmers using mobile payments, right? You have one of our portfolio companies, M-Pharma, that is revolutionizing and digitizing the entire pharma ecosystem to empower the FDAs and governments to deal with pharmacovigilance, to be able to create a platform where you can actually track clinical data, to be able to optimize inventory management at the pharma level. The ways in which you can use the mobile platform to revolutionize not just the consumer industry, but all other industries, to me, is what's incredible. And the other thing I'll mention quickly is, as we think about disruptive technologies, I don't think it is simply looking at the next app or the next major thing per se. I think it's also leveraging existing technologies to disrupt how current businesses are done. So if I take healthcare, for example, in our healthcare business, we've been able to expand margins from single digit to between 30 to 40% simply by digitizing the platform, simply by optimizing inventory management using EHR, and looking in ways in which we can use digital tools to make our supply chain more efficient, to better engage with our consumers, and to make sure we run better businesses. There are opportunities to do that in real estate. Ghana has a housing deficit of 2 million. Nigeria has a housing deficit of over 14 million. We have not figured out a way to come up with affordable housing. And when you look at the demographics of Africa we speak about, where we're going to be in 2030 with the largest youth population, it creates huge opportunities. But these are huge opportunities only if we can create jobs for the future, and only if we can create opportunities for this new growth of young people. And so the challenge here is, how can we leverage these technologies to not just drive change, but to create opportunities for these young people, and to pay attention to the fact that disruptive technology can be a plus, but it also can be a negative. And how do we balance some of the good and the bad that comes out of these technologies? So I'm excited to be here and excited for this discussion. Thank you.
Excellent. Rohan?
Yes. Is this working? Okay, perfect. So my name is Rohan Patnaik. I'm basically, we have a software services company based in Silicon Valley. We have teams of engineers between Brazil, India, and Serbia. A lot of our work recently has focused on Latin America and Africa, primarily in Latin America, and we're growing out in Africa. So that's where we stand. Most of our services that we provide are in the non-consumer facing area. Probably, I think somewhere along the 60% range, and the rest are in the consumer facing area. So in the consumer facing area, we have two incubators, one in Dubai and one in Panama, and we're looking to start a third one in Africa. We haven't necessarily chosen where. It's likely to be in Rwanda, and that's generally what we do. With regards to technology disrupting the continent to a certain degree, I think a lot of, at least my personal focus, and a lot of what will make a significant impact on the continent is technology with regards to logistics, in my mind, primarily because of the natural resource and agricultural sectors, in my personal opinion. For example, one of the trends that we've seen over the last, I would say, probably less than a decade, has been increased regulation with regards to natural resource transfers and exports. So with that regard, for example, the Dodd-Frank Act here in the US has limited what can be, exactly what can be exported, what materials are needed and proofs are needed for exportation of certain natural resources from countries such as Congo-Kinshasa. And that there are significant, for better or for worse, there are significant technologies that will alleviate that. For example, this ties into something that I was speaking to you about earlier, which is just simple RFID technology, which has been around for practically decades or almost 2 decades now, can be used to essentially facilitate any sort of movement in goods. A lot of the EAC now is using RFID technology to track just trucks as they've come in. This is in particular, this is very interesting for a country like Rwanda, which is landlocked, as you all know. Food prices are relatively higher than other countries in the region, and most of that comes down to the fact that most of it has to be imported in. And until recently, it would be significantly easier to go through the Mombasa, Uganda, down to Kigali, as opposed to going across through Dar. And that's because of the number of weigh stations in each point. Now, if you can basically use technology to facilitate these transfer of goods, you can generally save insurance costs, and you can save time by the time perishable goods, for example, arrive. And so I'm excited to be here.
Excellent. Dr. Ndemo? Yeah, it's on.
Sorry about this. My name is Bitange Ndemo. I don't quite have a fancy title like CEO. I teach at the University of Nairobi, but the reason why I'm here is most likely the work I did while I worked for the government of Kenya. And this is about 7 years ago when we decided that we need to solve some of the problems that we faced in the IT sector. And secondly, because I've always been thanking God for giving Africa too many problems, because any one of those problems you solve, you become great. And this is true because some of the simple things we did would never have happened in the Western world, where you have banks in every corner. And I remember when we introduced mobile payments and how the financial regulator refused completely and said it has never worked anywhere. As I kept on telling him, it needs to work here, then everybody would see that. But eventually we succeeded and completely disrupted the financial sector in Kenya, where more than 50% of the mobile money happens in Kenya today. And that has changed over time, that we have moved from simple money transfer. We are seeing new products like microinsurance. We are seeing savings. But more importantly, it has completely changed in the sense that now central bank, which was refusing to license the transfer of money, is now saying money circulation in the country has gone higher because people no longer keep the money under the mattresses as they used to do. This has completely changed. And the discourse now is centering around what we can do to change the continent completely. Since I left government, I mentor a number of startups and also advise what we call iHub, which has been where most of the innovations have been coming from. What I see, the area of agriculture, education, healthcare is completely going to change, and the solutions are coming from Africa. I'm saying this because even multinationals that ordinarily used to spend their time researching here and coming with solutions to Africa, we are now seeing a fusion between these multinational and international universities coming to work with people in Africa. A good example, 3 years ago, we signed up with IBM. IBM now came this year and said, here is Watson as a platform that we can solve the problems of Africa together. And I see so many of the solutions would come out of this fusion between the village and a multinational company to deal with the problems that are Africa. He mentioned about the report, the McKinsey report. he didn't mention about 300 billion in terms of productivity gains in Africa because of the new technologies. This is going to happen especially in the agricultural sector, where in most cases we have done grown food crops in places where the productivity is much lower. Today, because of the disruptiveness we created, especially with open data, we are able to do big data analytics and simply getting a simple information to the farmer that what you need to grow here is this crop which you would maximize productivity. This has never happened as Africa mostly grew maize, even in places where you need not to grow maize. You are going to see a lot more transformation in agricultural sector than you have seen in Africa, and this is good because of food insecurity that has affected Africa over a period of time. So we see a lot more happening. There are new technologies coming. Some of you probably have utilized Ushahidi, which is being used globally. And I liked when Ashish said that some of the solutions would come from Africa to change the globe. This is one of the solutions. Even M-Pesa, which started from Kenya, it's beginning to impact on the way the credit cards are being run globally, because we have seen MasterCard, Visa coming to see what is happening. So I finish by saying God is great. He gave us problems. Now we are being to get noted. Thank you very much.
Excellent. So each of you touched on your own business and civil service experience, and the potential implications are many. The enabling technologies are what we're especially keen on. Ayodeji, you spoke about the challenge of not having credit ratings. Well, one case example prospective solution to this is coming from Upriver, where our colleagues at Harvard's Entrepreneurial Finance Lab have spun out EFIN Labs, which is about psychometric credit ratings, sussing out the ethical and actionable stances of entrepreneurs for the purpose of banks being able to make investments on the basis of not having classical credit ratings. Right? So here we have a disruptive technological solution to this problem. Or we have the case of smartphones blossoming, fast following the growth of feature phones in the continent. You're an investor in multiple industry sectors. This is potentially one of the biggest enablers of rethinking how educational services are provisioned. Right? The power of these digital devices may invert the classroom by bringing global content, whether it's the edX initiative, that's a joint venture between MIT, Harvard, and several other universities. The channel for that is not likely to be a child sitting at a desktop, but rather engaging with an affordable smart tablet. You mentioned, Ron, the challenge of doing logistics in a way that solves the real problems, whether it's tracing the root origins of minerals, historically thought of as conflict, diamonds or other, really ascertaining where those are from, and also dealing with the challenges of counterfeiting. Right? People interrupting the legitimate flow of goods. All of that can be traced with whether it's RFID or the technologies such as SourceMap. These are powerful new solutions. And Kenya, incredible as a place where people are living the future first. You're showing the world what living with mobile money can really be like. And not only that, what are the new higher value added services being built upon that enabling platform? And it's deployed with greater density in Kenya than anywhere else on the planet. They are indeed a testbed, a living lab for this new digital future. So with these case examples in mind, I'd like to ask each of you to spotlight what enabling technologies are you most excited about that are emerging today, or things which we need a solution for, and especially the non-obvious, right? Things which we may not yet have thought of. Please.
Okay, so let me pick again on financial services. When you look at the key remittance corridors in the world, you discover that some of the biggest corridors are in Africa. And Nigeria is an example of one of the biggest remittance corridors in the world. As of last year, Nigeria's remittance corridor is a $20 billion corridor. And currently accounts for about 60% of all the continent's remittance or remittances going on the continent as of last year. And on the back of that, you discover that of course, there are key incumbents. The MoneyGram, the Western Union, and of course, Western Union is a big colossus in terms of global remittance in the world. It's a $5 billion business, annual business. And when you look at what is going on in the continent in terms of remittance and people trying to take advantage of the opportunity in remittance, online remittances is of course evolving on the continent, and some of the biggest players are operating out of London. You have some of the players like World Remittance, and what they do basically, instead of having a brick or mortar operation or having an operation which is being enabled by retail outlets, what they're doing right now is they're migrating a lot of the operations online. And I think just about a month or 2 months ago, World Remittance raised about $40 million US dollars to go after the opportunity globally. So World Remittance currently, I think they help in enabling remittance in about 190 countries. So for me, I think there are clearly opportunities in remittance, which is just an example of what is going on in financial services. And if you're just going to pick on an opportunity, if you're thinking of online remittance or remittance itself, you can think of online because there are very few players there. The competition is still very low. Barriers to entry are still quite low. I think the only key challenge will be around legal and compliance and just ensuring that you can, of course, you can play in the country you're trying to do business. But of course, like I said initially when I gave the introductory remarks, is when you just think of one key corridor in sub-Saharan Africa, think of the Nigerian $20 billion annual opportunity. And if you can execute 1% of that in 3 to 5 years, I think you'll be in a good spot in terms of impact and, of course, in terms of value you've been able to create for your employees, shareholders, and for the world. So I think pretty much financial services is huge. It's only going to increase on the continent. And when you also think of intra-Africa trade, you discover that intra-Africa trade is currently at about single digits, about 8%. And of course, one of the key things that will happen over the next 10 to 15 years on the continent is we're going to see more of intra-Africa trade. And when we're talking of intra-Africa trade, some of the things that goes with trade is money. And of course, money will flow in terms of we're going to see more of intra-Africa remittances going on the continent. And globally, currently, in terms of cost of transferring money on the continent is the highest in the world. It varies from about 25 cents to 40 cents for transferring a single dollar. And when you compare that, that is almost double to what you get across Europe or what you get between Europe and the rest of America, or between North America to the rest of the Americas. So there's an opportunity to do to come up with solutions. Number one, to reduce the cost of remitting money on the continent. And of course, there is also the opportunity in terms of playing in this space, because I think when you think about the next frontier itself, people are always saying Africa is the next frontier, but of course there are some key sectors that are going to help the next frontier to come to life, and financial service is one of the key sectors that will make that happen. And when you look at other sectors as well, natural resources, there are some disruptions happening in natural resources with respect to technology. But I think all across the continent itself, I think there is still too much emphasis on oil itself. But people are not really thinking deeply enough about the natural resources as a sector with respect to mining. What are the kind of technologies that can come up? I've not seen any. What are the kind of technologies that you can deploy in terms of discovering maybe junior mines, or in terms of encouraging the evolution of junior mines to senior mines in terms of access, because one of the key things, apart from discovery of a minefield or discovery of the natural resources, is also transport. So are there ways in which we can use technology to leapfrog those kind of industries? But because they are latent, those are latent resources on the continent that are waiting for disruption. Thank you.
Great. I'll talk about healthcare. And healthcare for me is very personal. My father is a doctor, a dermatologist in Ghana, and he's been practicing for over 45 years. My father loves going into the rural areas to deliver healthcare. And the roads to get to a lot of the hinterlands are terrible. Really bad conditions. In fact, Ghana recently lost one of its neurologists. And in a country where you only have 3 neurologists, the consequence of losing one is monumental. My father survived a plane crash and about 4 really terrible car accidents. It got so crazy, it was even covered by BBC, because it didn't make sense that he should survive so many accidents, just trying to get to the hinterlands. Right? And so when this happened, I said, okay, look, we don't need to lose him. So I started thinking through he wants to get access to healthcare to people in the rural area. We have this issue with bad roads. How do we solve that? And so as I started thinking through that, I started thinking about how can we leverage technology? So I said, look, Dad, instead of taking this bad road to go to Bunkrugu, maybe I can go to Bunkrugu and set up, we set up a little center with a webcam, because it's dermatology. We can have a nurse there trained who can do the diagnostics. And so we set up the first ever e-portal where using webcam, you can actually, in Bunkrugu, talk to my dad in Accra. And so healthcare for me is a huge sector in which we can use current and disruptive technologies to transform the place. Africa today has 24% of the global disease burden. 24%. Yet we only have 3% of healthcare workers. And the challenge is, if you want to be a dermatologist today, you can't, unfortunately, technology cannot accelerate that. Right? You have to do your 4 years of undergrad and 4 years of med school, and then I don't know how long residency is, 5+ years. So it's going to take, 13 to 15 years for us to get another dermatologist. And we can't wait. Between now and then, I was shocked when I found out that Ghana actually has the highest per capita skin cancer cases, according to the World Health Organization. We can't wait for 13 years from now before we're going to get a specialist. So between now and then, we have this big challenge of 24% of the global disease burden. And we have 3% of global healthcare workers. How do we bridge that gap? How do we increase access to healthcare? And this is where we can use technology. This is where this becomes useful. This is where now we're talking earlier about how MIT is working on some technologies, Philips, Medtronic, and others, where you can basically take the smartphone to a village, you can connect it to some hardware, and it becomes a diagnostic tool. So now you're able to do some little lab tests, you're able to do minor tests, and that will transform the continent. That would be able to reach people. That would be able to literally save lives. So we don't lose our doctors and specialists, and that saves us time as well. So as I think about healthcare, I think that is one area in which we can truly use technologies to change lives, to expand access, because when I think of some of the reasons why people lose lives today, it's really sad. You go across the continent, I've been to over 30 countries on the continent. And most of these places I've looked at healthcare. And it's really sad where you see lives being lost because the person has malaria, but it was misdiagnosed. Or the person had TB and was told it was malaria. And there's room in which we can solve these issues. Just so many deaths that come as a result of adverse drug reactions or fake drugs. And we have the technology to solve that today. We seeded a company called mPharma, which is building an incredible platform where if you go to a clinic or a doctor, the doctor can use the app to prescribe amoxicillin for you. You get a unique SMS. You go to the pharmacist is hooked up to the system. You show your SMS. The pharmacist has all your data already from the doctor's place. So they can immediately tell you, look, this particular drug will not be good for you because based on your clinical data from the last 5 years, we've seen this reaction. Or he can tell you, look, this makes sense for you. Here you go. And then barcode, we can authenticate it because on the back end, we're going to be connected to the drug manufacturers. So you can be told that, look, this drug is authentic. You can take it. This drug cannot be authentic. There's a problem. And when there's a problem, we're connected it also to the FDAs and the regulatory bodies. So the government, it's one thing to be able to just say this drug is real and this drug is not real. But you need to link it to the government. So the government knows that, look, this is a bad drug. This is the person responsible for distributing this drug. And you collect that data at a macro level, it becomes very powerful. Right? And so this is a type of technology that becomes very helpful in solving an issue of pharmacovigilance and reducing deaths. But it's also very valuable to the pharmaceutical companies. We've spoken to everyone from Bayer to Novartis. They have no idea who uses what in Africa. They don't know who their consumer is. No one collects this data. So at the same time you're solving this problem of pharmacovigilance, you are taking this data and you can sell it to the pharmaceutical companies. And in a validation of the value of health data, IMS Health went public last week at a $7 billion valuation. So you see, I love Africa because, as Honorable said, God gave us plenty of problems. And it's lots of opportunities to solve these problems. But it's one of the few places in the world where you can do well and do good. You can transform the continent. You can change lives. You can also make money.
To follow up on Sangu's case examples, you have businesses like ClickMedix, born as a Media Lab Development Ventures class project that's doing teledermatology, using the imaging capacity of a phone, a local health worker who's distributed where the people are, connecting all that information to the dermatologists who are typically in the big cities, but not necessarily in country, anywhere on the net, which could be planet-wide. A second case example is Inetra, born out of Camera Culture Group. Here we use a smartphone with a relatively simple hardware clip-on. Think of it as a hardware app. And the hybrid of hard and soft on a smartphone turns that phone into an eye prescription diagnostic tool, right? Replacing the expensive capital equipment that a person would normally have to go to the doctor to use. Now we have the diagnostic coming to the patient or being distributed far more affordably, far more widely. In the third case example, just to give you a taste of what's afoot today, we have at MIT an institute-wide elective offering in creating the tricorder. What was a science fiction imagination, a vision from the late 1960s in Star Trek, is today an engineering challenge in a class here, and it's one of the X Prize challenges as well, to provoke people into saying, let's generalize this idea of smartphones as diagnostic enablers and make the full suite the tricorder. It's exciting times. Ron, maybe give us a taste of your own, what you think are either compelling or needed enabling technologies.
I mean, I think I might, for this question, I might just reiterate a point I made, which I think logistics comes to a certain degree. I mean, even what you were saying, right, with regards to the web portal for the medical diagnostics. I think logistics is the key to, I mean, just frankly, helping several economies just increase social cohesion and also intra-trade, for example, which you were bringing up earlier. I can give you a story on, I used to run a cacao trading company in Cote d'Ivoire for a while. And there, the just simple logistical technology would have helped us so much, and I think it would have helped the industry. As most of you know, I mean, cacao is pretty much the backbone on which modern Cote d'Ivoire is built. We used to have a buying station in Daloa, which is in the middle of the country, and we used to sell and basically buy it from local cooperatives and farmers, and we used to sell in Abidjan in the southeast, or in the port of San Pedro, which is more in the west. So what we used to do when I started, again with not that much money, I started this company a couple years ago. We used to have 3 trucks rotating around the regions in the central area of Daloa to buy cocoa, all right? And we used to purchase it, and each of those trucks had around $40,000 in CFA, so there was about $120,000 per day we used to transact in West African francs, which is a lot of cash to be running around with, and especially given the condition of the roads. And to be honest, I mean, for example, we weren't necessarily paying each of our people, the truck drivers, $40,000, and yet they were holding on to all this cash. So there would be days that, you know, some truckers would just go missing for for a couple of days at times. And we would be quite worried. I mean, we didn't have that much capital to start with, right? But so simple technologies such as just tracking that truck, right? I mean, we used to then, and after it came back to our buying station, our warehouses in Daloa, we would then truck it down. If we took the route at the wrong time of day, and this was right after the war, approximately, if you took the truck down to the port of San Pedro on the west at the wrong time of the day, that truck, there is a risk of that truck going missing as well. And that's the truck which has all your cocoa, right? A 30-ton truck. So just simple tracking of these vehicles, for example, which is very cheap. I'm talking about, you can have, I'm going back to RFID because it's so cheap, right? I mean, you can have it, each chip installed for a few bucks, for example. You can have various firms basically monitor this if you yourself don't want to do it. But those technologies would lead to significant, I think, economic gains, especially given a lot of these agriculture-based economies, especially in Cote d'Ivoire, for example, where the economy is run by, the cocoa economy is very driven by the Lebanese traders in the country. The margins are very high, but part of the reason is because there are these risks associated with it, right? We were making probably, at one point, the margins that we could have been making were as high as $600 a metric ton, which is absurd with the margins you would make. But frankly, you would know that some of this cocoa would go bad, some of this the truck might be out in the rain for a couple days, which means the entire truck is lost because the humidity levels go up in the bean. And so that, if you could track it and you could know where these trucks are sitting, you could have a proper, just a logistic solution for these type of simple problems. These margins, there are many other people who would enter that industry, and with that, the margins would go down in the industry, and I think that would help, especially a lot of the local farmers. And I think, I'm not sure, because I haven't worked in these sectors in other countries, but for example, if you look at the cashew industry in Guinea-Bissau or the peanut industry in Senegal, I think some of these technologies in the logistics space would help these local economies as well.
Fantastic.
Oh, thanks. I think we are still not through with the mobile platform. I think almost 80% of the current software being developed is developed on the mobile platform. And this is practically where everybody should be going. We tried to push the entire government onto the mobile platform. But it won't work without data. And practically every government now should begin to release data. If you have been reading the newspapers recently, most African countries are reviewing their GDP. Nigeria suddenly becomes the largest economy in Africa. That tells you that we have been using voodoo statistics for a very long period of time. And it doesn't help us to do that. Data can be out there for anybody to do the verification of it, to use it, because why I'm saying this is because of the impact that we are beginning to see, especially on the healthcare, where recently a section of Central or Rift Valley, it was discovered that they could treat esophageal cancer because data was available to see the environmental changes that created the problem. We could actually solve that. And the reason why I keep on saying Africa is more important is that if you get it done in Africa, you have done it for the world, because you are looking at cost, you are looking at logistics and everything. And once you come up with the product, you are ready to take it to the rest of the world. This is so critical. Data plus the mobile platform, you practically get everything from all over the world because of the uptake of the mobile. The gap areas, you would allow me tell you what was going on through my mind as I flew to America. And any turbulence, I would think this guy is going to be like the Malaysian guy and launch us into the Atlantic. I think this is MIT at this time. I think it's with Google, you are able to know everything. We can be able to trace these flights up here and know where they are going, and reduce the amount of fear that we are now beginning to develop wherever there is any turbulence. And I'm saying this because it is possible actually to override the pilot if you hear that their mind is changing, and disable them and land the flight safely. I'm just telling you what was going on through my mind. That are we so helpless that if this guy decides to plunge into Atlantic, we go, all of us. And I think this is something we need to consider globally and say, they are madmen pilots. This is the second flight after the Ethiopian. The guy decided to land in Switzerland, unauthorized. And there are so many who would learn from this and land us into Russia maybe or somewhere. So I think it shows, if you see the discussions on CNN, how frustrating it is that 7 days we can't trace. And yet this is the time we are talking about GPS and other things. There is so much gap area that we need to look at. And even that gap area, we can be able to determine who gets on to pilot the planes, because data can give us the behavior patterns and eventually save our lives. I think that is, even though not related, it is what was going on through my head. Thank you.
So this actually spotlights a fantastically compelling challenge, the tracing of everything from root origins to end destinations, right? Whether it's for the purpose of understanding safety and security issues, or it's understanding accident context, or it's in the case of doing business in an agri-products arena, having provenance tracking from field to food on a plate is incredibly important. I just want to spotlight one case example, illustration of a technology business that's making this possible, a business called SourceMap, which is an open source mechanism for the many players in a value chain to document their stage. Most players in a value chain know where they purchase from and they know who they sell to. But you ask them what happens 2 steps before them or 2 steps downstream from them, and there's near total ignorance. And this is true across many sectors. So in just Cote d'Ivoire alone, the global chocolatiers have banded together to underwrite an initiative for them to better understand the challenges faced by farmers on the ground. Today, it's a highly intermediated market. There is no direct connection between chocolate makers and growers. But through an open technology like SourceMap, you finally have a chance to make this link. And that can be generalized across multiple sectors. This is a fantastically interesting example of IT meets logistics. What we'd like to do next is for those of you with especially pressing questions, please come up to the mics in the aisles. While you flow up to those mics, I just want to offer our panelists the chance to either react to or ask questions of one another. Any of you want to take the bite?
I guess in general, the only thing I wanted to mention was as we think about all these wonderful technologies and ideas, I think sometimes we have to be careful about technology. And it's important to realize that, especially, you see, technology, you have to adapt it to local circumstances. Okay, when I think about that, I see my Clean Water Soul sister, Saran, here. And the first water project I did with my nonprofit Clean Aqua was in a village called Ejimante in Ghana. And we went to the community. It had a spring infested with E. coli. So I actually worked with MIT on this, Susan Mercott and a bunch of others. And the initial idea we had, I was a freshman at Harvard at the time, was, well, let's, Ghana, a lot of sun. Let's develop this solar-powered spring cleaning system, high-tech. We're very excited. So we went to Ghana. We were like, we're going to bring MIT, top technology, put it in there, solve the problem. And I'll never forget this. We were working, and the director of water said, you people will bring solar powered, eh? I said, yes, top technology, high tech. He said, very good. And then when it breaks down, will you be here to fix it? I said, no, we'll be back in Cambridge. And who in Ejimante understands solar technology to be able to fix it? So sometimes it sounds like a good idea in the ivory tower, thinking lots of sun, solar, no-brainer. But you go on the ground and you realize that this doesn't make any sense. So I think as we're thinking through disruptive technologies, remember that don't sit in the ivory tower and come up with solutions. Go on the ground and ask the people on the ground, what are the problems? And how can we solve it? It has to be, the problems to African solutions have to come from the ground. We can't just sit here in the lab or in the ivory tower and come up with these technological solutions. They won't work on the ground.
All right, well, touche. Questions for our panelists? Oh, come on, Shirley. Well, yes, sir.
I have to thank the organizers of this seminar. I'm so happy. If you ride a horse inside me, it will not hit a bomb. That's how happy I am. I am Emmanuel Awe. I'm president of Omni Consulting Group. It's a startup. All my life, I've spent my life in the financial sector, banking, name it, Wall Street. So in this country, I'm just going to hit on what our panelists talk about there. I was in Nigeria, Ondo State, about a couple of months ago. I was riding through the capital, Akure, and some part of the city was they have the former, the regular electricity. The other part, they have solar powered. So I asked myself, and the state has this acronym after it, the state of sunshine, or sunshine state. I mean, it's just like Florida, where there is no sunset. We have plentiful of sun, yet why are we not powering our electricity using this sun that is almost 24 hours. So I asked, one of my people, I said, well, they said they have been battling with the problem. So my question to you is this. We have this problem, like you said, rightly so, too, that we cannot sit on ivory tower and then expect, to solve the problem in those localities. How are we going to solve the problem considering all the problems, governmental problem, legal problem, all kinds of problems associated with it? And we need to solve this problem. What is your suggestion? Because I was dumbfounded because I had no solution to that. I saw the problem. We need electricity. Solar power is one way to reach that. So what do we suggest?
Panelists?
I think that's the easiest question because a guy called Maslow developed some model on the hierarchy of needs. And electricity was not one among the one at the bottom. And I tend to think Africa needs to look at first how to feed. Actually, once people are fed, clothed, and housed, the next level is they will demand electricity. And actually, they will take care of it. Now, if you take electricity to a hungry person, they actually have no relationships at all. And I'll say this because we've seen so many models in Kenya where something fails, and after you deal with certain problems, it succeeds. And if you see the section which had the power, I would assume is a much higher in terms of living, in terms of resources. So in Africa, I think the very basic thing we need to deal with is food. And that's why I'm saying some of the solutions we're working on agricultural productivity, then surplus, then assist them on how to dispose. A lot of agricultural production in Africa goes to waste. Actually goes to waste because we haven't been able to help them to preserve it or to create value. I mean, I know villages where they have so much bananas, and when they are ripe, they chase kids around to eat them before it gets rotten. We actually need to go there and be able to help them with simple technologies. After that, they would actually come to demand for electricity themselves. And I think that is where the solution lies. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think it's mutually exclusive. I love that you brought up banana. I just invested in a company in Kenya called Stawi Foods and Fruits.
Yeah.
And Eric Mutomi, a great guy, grew up in Western Kenya where he was surrounded by banana farmers. And he realized that every year they'll grow the bananas and the bananas will go to waste. So after he graduated from law school, instead of going to work for a law firm, he won some business plan competitions and started a factory processing this excess banana and making gluten-free flour. And now he's doing fortified cereals to feed infants and all of these issues. But guess what? The factory we have in Nairobi, we need electricity to power it.
Yes.
Right. So I actually think from a government perspective, I think one of the greatest bottlenecks on the continent is power.
That's right.
I went to my healthcare business in Ghana. We are doing over 30% margins, right? I went to Nigeria, and I met with Fuller Hygia Group. And I've been studying the Nigerian healthcare market over the last 5-6 years, because I really want to make some foray there. And I looked at the world-class hospitals and clinics in Nigeria, relatively speaking. And I realized that the best performing hospitals and the best performing health centers in Nigeria were barely doing 10% margins. And it didn't make sense to me why a clinic in Ghana is doing over 30% and a clinic in Nigeria is doing 10% and they are neighbors. And the answer was power.
Right.
Because the hospital and the clinic in Nigeria has all these generators and is spending so much OPEX on diesel, whereas the hospital and clinic in Ghana isn't. So I think when I think of Nigeria, and I think of the rest of the continent, especially Nigeria, electricity is this bottleneck that's holding back industry, where everyone spends so much money on diesel, so much time, and it just disrupts us. And once we can solve and reform power, it will unleash this force that will allow everything to be easy. It will enable people to be able to charge their mobile phones and get this technology. See, and so my last thing is my appeal to government. If you do whatever you will, just solve power. That's all.
The right kind of power.
Right. Solve electricity. Right? And as entrepreneurs, we'll take care of the rest.
Okay. Thank you.
And on power.
All right, everybody. Alas, we have run out of time for this panel. But join me in thanking all of our guests for their comments and notes.